discussion for the rest of Pakistan and the world to come and be based in and come and engage in. This has always been a crossroads. And it's been through a 15-year period that has been painful and challenging. But I think that we should all be proud of the fact that we're actually emerging out of that period and emerging more vibrant to take our place in the world again. The reason that I'm here actually is because it just really excites me. And I think that as representatives, we need to play that role to actually give the message that's back here. We do believe that Pakhtunkhwa is a gateway to economic prosperity in Pakistan. And I'll tell you how. I want to focus on 2 or 3 sides to that story. I think first of all, and you'll have heard this in discussions, the economic potential of Pakhtunkhwa, and in particular in terms of increasing Pakistan's trade, Pakistan's economic dynamism, is significant for not just one reason, but 2 or 3. First, because it was a market that has been through a relatively challenging period. There's that growth potential. We all, as far as Pakistan is concerned, talk of Karachi and Lahore and Islamabad and think that those are the big markets. But if you think of Pakhtunkhwa as a whole, with the merger of FATA, it's about 35 million people, up to 40 million people. And 40 million people is about the size of a large European country. There's probably only 5 or 6 European countries that are larger in size than 40 million. So this is a big market, and it's a big market that's dynamic, that's young. We've been certainly quite dynamic at keeping a pretty high population growth rate. But so we need to try and now take the dividend of that. We do have a large segment of youth in our society that I keep on selling as saying, because the private sector is underrepresented over here, you have more raw youth with more potential that's more hungry and eager for success than perhaps some of the other more developed urban centers of the country, where there are more options, more opportunities. So that's one reason why this is a potential gateway for growth within the country, because it's a market whose potential has been untapped. And I want everyone who's from outside Pakhtunkhwa to actually take that message. What also builds on that is the fact that there's a government that has come in for the second time. And I won't talk to you just from a party perspective, I'll explain this to you rationally. Because accountants should be rational people. And businessmen should be rational people and take rational decisions. Because this is a government coming back for the second time, it's come for the first time a government here has come, not just with a majority, but a 2/3 majority, the first time since 1951 that a single party government has come in this province. We have a lot to prove, and we have to not compete with anyone else, but compete with the trajectory that we took Pakhtunkhwa on last time. And I hope that later on I'll be able to prove to you that there are ways in which we're actually trying to deliver on that challenge. But because we have to compete, we have an incentive to open this place up for you. And we can only do that if we start to realize that growth will come through engagement of the private sector. Which is why you're seeing us open our doors to more talent from the rest of the country, open our doors to more talent from abroad, open our doors to more events like this, because we have to make this happen. So that's one dimension on which there's growth potential over here. It's simply the fact that we're emerging out of a challenging period and there are different conditions for success that are there. a large market, a young, vibrant labor force that at the moment is probably cheaper and at least as talented as the rest of the country, and a government that actually has to deliver on dimensions other than what it delivered on the last time. So we have to get it right. But that's not the only dimension. Second dimension is there's a narrow strip of land that is basically Pakistan's major on-land trade route, not just to Afghanistan but to Central Asia. Right? And in terms of literally being a gateway to economic prosperity, I'll talk about one of my favorite projects, which actually shows that if we start thinking out of the box, how Pakistan can actually just prosper from small steps and small investments. Today I probably chaired my 20th meeting on the Torkham border, where we're investing to try and increase trade with Afghanistan and Central Asia. This came out of a single brainstorming about a year and a bit ago, where someone pointed out that the potential to increase trade if the border with Afghanistan, which may be Pakistan's biggest international crossing, were open around the clock, because it was literally only open 8 to 10 hours. The challenge here was the fact that we, to do this, had to involve 7 or 8 different entities across the federal and provincial governments. So the provincial government, the DC office, the FC, NLC, which operates the border terminal, the military, which is a relevant stakeholder in the tribal districts in terms of security, FIA, customs, NADRA, and the foreign office. Now, it's very simple. All you have to do is to keep the gates open, but to get this done, the difficult part in Pakistan to do initiatives like this is actually to put 8 or 9 people around the table that represent different entities and do it. We took the decision to do this in January. We went to the federal government, to the PM's office, to request help. The PM championed it, tasked his advisor on establishment, Abab Shahzad, who helped co-lead it from the federal government. We agreed to do this in January last year and set ourselves a target of 6 months. I remember our first meeting was on the 30th of January, and on the 3rd of September, 6 months and 3 days later, so we were 3 days late, we actually opened the border 24/7. You know the impact, because we try and look at the figures, and I was a consultant in my past life. So that's like a poor version of an accountant, because we try to be decent with numbers, but we're not as precise as you are. But we opened the border, and in the last 3 months, looking at growth versus the previous 4 months, both tax revenue as well as exports have increased by over 80%. And if we look at year-on-year growth, then exports have increased by about 25%, and import taxes have increased manifold. So the issue here was to spend a little bit of money to get this right. And because the federal government was facing complications in terms of figuring out how to do this, we actually stepped out of the box and didn't let, but donated money to the federal government to open the Torkham border, basically to put lighting, generators, etc. We spent 70 million of the province's money to do this. The impact, annualized, based on current data, of that 70 million rupees that we spent, is 4.4 billion rupees